On today's episode, I'm going to teach you how to wrap bacon around everything, but not to get you fat profits in your business. Because today we were joined by my dear friend, one of my best friends, Brad Costanzo, who runs Bacon Wrap Business. And I had so many takeaways from the episode. I have a sticky note with 12 things I have to choose from to tell you. We talk about delegation and leadership, consumption to generate massive momentum for you as an entrepreneur. We talk about intentional and accidental consumption. But I have to say, the biggest thing is he changed one word in a phrase that I guarantee you will increase your business. It will increase your scale, your sales, your customer retention, your team meetings. And he shares the breakdown that Disney and many other companies use, like these billion-dollar companies, to make sure that every single idea that you have, its only chance of success. No more failed ideas, no more quick starts, no more failed parking lots, things that you invested time, money, energy in. And we break down the entire process so you have it. So I'm going to shut up so we can get into the episode. I love you all. I will see you inside the episode. Have a good laugh to celebrate our 100th episode. Cue the intro now. And welcome! I'm stoked because today is the 100th episode. It's episode 99, but I dropped an episode 000. So it is the 100th episode, and I am here with the guy that wraps everything in business in bacon. And bacon. He wraps everything in bacon in his business, including me, his friendships, his wife, and everything in between. But we have my friend Brad Costanzo here, who I've actually known of maybe like 9 years, because he's known my wife longer than I've known my wife. And so I've been being told about him since I was the bacon master, Uncivilized Caveman. But he is like one of my dear friends. We talk often, daily, and live in the world of business and marketing and mindset and growth and all the things, as you guys say, when it comes to business and helping companies build or scale their business. He's a renaissance man when it comes to this. He's been involved in absolutely everything as a podcast, been behind some of the biggest information marketing companies, been behind billionaires and everything alike, and literally just has an unlimited toolbox of tools to grab when he needs it. Consistently blows my mind. It is about 1,000 times better than me at documenting things, which makes him a lot more effective because I just pull it out of my butt. It sticks to the wall. He documents it, uses it again, and I'm like, can you please send me a copy? So today I have my friend Brad Costanzo. Brad, good to be here, man.
Yeah, so sometimes I pull it out of my butt too. You just can't. That's where I document it.
Yeah, but at least when you pull it out of your butt, I feel like you pull it out and then you document it before you send it, so it looks way more put together than I'm just like, I'll record another video for you. Hold on, I'll text that to you later. I'll send you an audio message. And I was like, man, I really got to get efficient with this.
There's a degree of truth to that. By the way, I was very impressed. You said I'm stoked to be here. You didn't say I'm super excited, which I think is the most overused video or podcast intro of anybody. Hey guys, I'm super excited to be here with you. And I was very excited that you said stoked.
I think I did that because I heard myself the other day say super excited again. Yeah. And I listen and consume so much, and I've been on so many interviews and interviewed. They're always like, and we're super excited to have George. And I was like, I got to do something different. And I think last podcast I did, I was supercalifragilistically expialidocious excited, but I wasn't there today. My Marshall Mathers skills are not there on the first interview of the day, but they're going to get there. So I am stoked. So everybody listening, when I say this, Brad and I literally text probably 40 times a day, back and forth. Like, we talk about everything, every business, every idea, every company we see doing it right, every hack and everything. And so I wanted to bring him on because he's a dear friend. And when I think about this, we have conversations that I think most entrepreneurs need to have, and we think about business like most businesses need to be think about. And I'm always leaning in on Brad for his ideas and his feedback, his creative some of his ideas, which, by the way, was Stiletto Coffee. And so we'll hear about all that stuff. And so, Brad, I do have to kick it off with the same question I ask everybody, and then we can take the rails off of everything. But yes. I would love your insight on this one. You've been in this game for a very, very long time. And so when you look back at this illustrious career of yours, what would you say was like one of the biggest lessons or the biggest mistakes that you made or you experienced? And what have you taken from that moving forward that you utilize from this point on?
Nice way to warm your guest up to a nice shallow, easy question.
Yeah. I told you the rails are off and you can buy time with that one.
Yeah. Um, biggest lesson, or well, biggest lesson and biggest mistake are usually pretty related, but not always. I think if I was to say my biggest lesson and mistake, it's something I've been thinking about more recently and been more cognizant of it is, when I first got into the world of digital marketing, it was a result of I'd read Tim Ferriss's 4 Hour Work Week, and there was a million things in that book, which takeaways. One of them, was the idea of outsourcing and delegation, and it was one of those things that I was like, "This is amazing. I'm totally going to do this," and I didn't. And I ended up just learning everything myself. I became very proficient at technology, at doing a little bit of everything and becoming a real jack of all trades in a lot of areas. But I do know that it really held me back. And it was it's helped me in some areas because I didn't have to rely on somebody else to just do it. I could learn it quickly, figure it out, just burn the midnight oil and get it done. But then when I look back at things, I'm like, I could have just easily paid somebody to do that for me. And I'll never forget, for instance, when I was talking to a good buddy of mine named Nate, who was he was in the business, and he and his business partner were doing, like, I don't know, $5 or $6 million a year. And they'd been doing this for several years. And he called me up and he goes, "Hey, I got a question. Is Aweber a shopping cart or an autoresponder?" And I go, "You got to be shitting me, dude. I just flew on this guy's private jet, right?" Or it was a chartered private jet. And I'm like, "You don't know the difference." And here I was going, like, I was doing okay, but I wasn't doing this. This is a long time ago. And I'm like, that was a real moment of holy crap. Because yeah, no, my team doesn't let me, I don't have the login for our Aweber system. So I don't know what it is. I just know that it's a way we communicate with our list or something. So I'll never forget them. I remember where I was when I heard that thing. And you know what? You would think I would have learned the lesson right then and there, but I didn't. And I continued. And I still do to this day, doing stuff myself, rolling up my sleeves and figuring it out. And it is one of my biggest mistakes. It's a lesson I have to keep on learning and relearning, but it's become much more cognizant now. I think it's become more cognizant now because I just finished Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan's book, Who Not How. But it was one of those things that really shined the light on, it was like I keep on getting bitch slapped across the face with a lesson that I know. And I've done this to some degree, but just nowhere near as much as I need to. And I think that's really become my theme this year more than anything, is I continue to have, like, delegation is the number one. Delegation and leadership are the two number one skill sets that I believe that are underdeveloped for myself.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to develop more.
Yeah, I think that's actually I think it's funny because you and I probably feed each other with this one because we both do it. We're like, "Oh, we got to figure it out. Let's go figure it out." And then we'll know what to do. And then we're like, "Oh, we got to delegate it." But by that point, we're so in doubt of, like, we can do it faster. We can do it more effectively. Oh, and, like, we talk about this. Like, the amount of ideas I've run by you, and you're like, "Why don't you just have somebody do it?" Or then you're like, "What about this?" I'm like, "Oh, just, outsource that one." But I think it's a really important topic. So
I'm a quick start. And I'm
yeah.
very impatient. And a real quick example, there was a Shopify thing. They're like, "Okay, well, we need this app installed correctly." And I'm not a coder or whatnot, but they're like, "Yeah, that'll take 3 to 5 business days." And I'm sitting here going, I can't, like, the burn of me going, like, I cannot wait 3 to 5 business days for you to, like, install something. Like, are the instructions there? Just give them to me. And I was looking at them. I'm like, I can do this. By God, I can do. And I peeled myself away and I go, nope, I'm just going to wait. And that, honestly, that was painful to wait.
Well, that's happened to me a ton too. I mean, that was probably my biggest downfall in Caveman, was the fact that I didn't have, like, this business influence of people. I had this, I have to survive and figure this out on my own. And it took maybe 5 years of me running that business, 4 years, before I even met any other people in the business or knew internet marketing, lived outside of what I was doing. And so the amount of times I brought my website down, the amount of times I broke stuff, the amount of times I made mistakes that took, like, 18 weeks to figure out that, like, oh, I haven't had an email sign up in 18 weeks because the form's been broken and 300 people a day were trying. Like, it had real world implications, and that's something that, you know what's funny is your friend that happened, we just finished, you saw the webinar, but we just finished a launch. And you and I are the same because I'm a quick start too. And patience is that one thread. And I think it's the thread that's weaved between, you know, delegation but leadership, because that whole thing is really understanding the big picture and playing the game. But I remember they were sending me some stuff and I was like, oh, I don't like it. And I went to go change it. And I don't have logins and passwords anymore. And I only have I have a team of 3 and they're amazing, but they're like, nope, nope, nope. And so I have to funnel everything to Slack. And it was, but then once I got over that hump of like, oh, I can't get into it. I can't fix it. I felt 1,000 times better on the other side, like literally being like, oh, it's out of my hands. And so I'm like, I'm going to go work out for an hour. And then I came back and it was fixed. And somehow, you know, it magically happened. But when you think about that, like, how do you define the line? Like, because this is what I'll say about you, Brad. Again, like what I love about you is you and I can dive down any rabbit hole and have deep levels of understanding and knowledge from an awareness perspective. And what I love about that for me, like I use it as a gift and you have the same one, is we can look at a challenge or a problem and then we can see it, but we can also pull ourselves up and see all the other things that are affecting that challenge by having that understanding. And so one of the things I struggle with is, where do I put my focus on getting that level of understanding, and where do I put it of like, oh, I just really need to keep that outsourced all the way? Because I've lived in this, I need to understand it so I can outsource it or utilize it or show up better. But like, how do you navigate that?
Very by the seat of my pants. Same thing. It's like, I need to know. I think it's very important for a lot of things to know what the definition of done looks like, of what you want done. Because it's if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish and what it should look like on the tail end, it's really hard to delegate it out because you won't even know if they've done a good job, right? So now there's some things, like if it has to do with code or whatnot, like it's like, look, I just need this site to do this thing or whatnot. I may say it should look like this, right? I don't know. It's delicate, and there's some stuff I'm like, no, I just got to do it. And there's still a part of perfectionism in me that I fight. And there's one part of me that's like, I don't know how I want what done looks like to me until I've finished it, right? So for instance, there is a campaign that I'm putting together for one of my businesses where it's copy driven. It's, there's a certain style of landing page and copy, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where I need to almost go through it and do it myself, even if it's not perfect, just to see it, because it comes to life while I'm doing it. And once I have it, then I've got at least a model, and I can now hand it off and tell somebody else to go create something similar. Unfortunately for me, I do that, and then I'm always woefully critical. And like, it's not what I wanted. It's not exactly what I wanted. So I have to kind of be okay with 80% of how I would do it. That's another Dan Sullivan thing. I think he's got another book called The 80% Approach, which I really liked, which had to do, it really helps you get over perfectionism. And it's like, get it 80% done. Like 80% done, and then pass it off, move on, do something else. You can always come back to it and get it up to 90%, but that 90 to 100 is where perfectionism lives, and that's not really where most of the money is.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get better at 80% is good enough.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, and I think too, 80% is where results live for our customers too, because I feel like what happens for me. I mean, you and I have had this. We've worked with. We've had some shared client experiences lately that we laugh about, right? But I find that like that 80% is typically feels like 120% for the client. It only feels like 80% on the back end, right? And so, but I have that thing as well, and I felt wrong. This is extremely validating. It's funny, we haven't talked about this like over our coffee or beach hangouts or long strolls on the beach. And by the way, for everybody listening, Brad and I really do go on long walks on the beach together.
We do.
It is a fact. And Adil, if you're listening, I will have to do a 3-way walk one of these times when we're visiting again. But it is extremely validating because, Brad, what will happen to me is like I'll have this idea, right? Like somebody will come to me with a challenge or a problem or be like, how should we sell this? What should this look like? What should the hook be? And my brain is thinking about all these possible solutions and they want an answer, but I literally am like, I kind of need some time to like get my hands in it and build it.
Yeah.
Like I know in theory what it should feel like and look like, and I don't know if it's not a skill set or maybe it's a part of my process. I need to take that and then literally go put my hands to work per se to then help clear up the picture of like what I could tell them to do or like
Same.
what I could guide my
100
team.
hundo.
And I've never met anybody else like that because I've met the you need to delegate it or you need to outsource it. And I was like, but I think for me, the art of building it is actually where I get the clarity on
Same.
what it should look like.
Same.
And so for me, I've been looking at that of like, when I do that, like understanding like, okay, I'm going to do this. Like right now, my team and I are building this new content dissemination strategy, right? Like that's really effective and really done. And they're like, and I can spit where they're like, what should it look like? They're asking me all these questions. I'm giving them answers. Like I'm still confused. I'm like, cause I haven't built it yet. I was like, just give me a day. And I sat down on my iPad and I was like, okay, this and this and this and this. And I sent it to them and they're like, okay, I'm like, yeah, go build that. Right. But I think what I'm doing now is like giving myself the container that like I can build to create clarity, but not a result. That's kind of like where my razor's edge is. Like I ride the unicycle down the middle. And so it's just really validating hearing this because I look at you and what I love about you is like I would think of you like if I was to reference you to somebody else, like somebody asked me about you the other day. I think it was Alex. Alex asked me and he's like, so how would you describe Brad?
I'm talking to Alex after this call, by the way.
Oh, perfect. Oh, you can tell him I said hi. Hi, Alex. I know you listen to this. Love you, brother. But I was talking, Alex, like, how would you describe him? And I like paused for a minute and like I had to go into my arsenal and I was like, well, Brad is like me, but not like me. He's a Renaissance man that gets big picture all the way down to the details required to make it happen. And he's a walking encyclopedia of knowledge. Like you're one of the only people I know
They call me Bradapedia for
like Bradapedia. Like seriously though, like for those of you that are listening, like I hope you get to share coffee with Brad one day, or Brad and I, or come to an event that he's at and speaking out with me, because you're the only person I know that like will be sitting there and we'll have like a 4-minute conversation, and not only do you converse, but you converse with reference material off the top of your brain. And then you follow up with it by like sending a book. Like we'll leave and an hour later, Brad's like, oh, remember we talked about this from Dan Sullivan's book at 80%. Here's my notes in Evernote on this. And by the way, like you should take this and apply this into your business, right? So
I've already made 2 book recommendations.
Yeah, I know. We're only 16 minutes in and there's 2. And I just started Who Not How. So I'm actually really excited about that one because I love Ben's work.
I'll send you my notes in Rome.
Yeah, send me your notes in Rome. And so the reason I'm asking that too is because when I look at you, you have this, I don't want to call it Jekyll and Hyde, but we have these 2 containers that you and I live in, right? Container 1 is like we create. We go create ideas, solutions, solve problems, do client work. But then the other side is we have this kind of consume where we, get in knowledge and, expand our research and deepen our reference material, right? So when you look at your day, and this is something I've not talked about on the podcast a lot, but something that I've been really leaning into, when you look at your life, like if you were to percentage it out of like consumption versus creation, like where do you put that? And then why do you, consume like you do and take the notes that you do? Because like you've inspired me massively. Like I'm using Rome research. It started with workflowy. Like I now read an article, I make a note about the article to put it into my, PKM and things like that. But I would kind of love to hear your thoughts and your process on this because it really makes you extremely valuable. And it's almost like you're just at the center hub of either you have the answer in your brain or you have this catalog to go into. And for me, the reason I'm asking is because one of the struggles I have as an entrepreneur is the FOMO of like, I read something and I'm going to forget it. I thought about something and I'm going to want to implement it. And it like stays open in my brain unless I get it down. And I'm using your PKM system, but I think you're one of the best in the world that I've ever seen at this. So I would kind of love your thoughts as how you balance that and how you do that.
Yeah. So, one of the first questions I think you asked is the how I balance like consumption versus production and creation. I consume way more than I create much to my chagrin. I love creating and I like to do much more so, but I'm just more, it's more natural to just jump into consumption mode because I can learn and digest things quickly. And I'm really good at, like, I've got that down. Like I've got that cadence down. And I'll explain that in a second. I need to do more creation because if you just consume for the act of consumption and hold it back without putting it back out there enough, you're not really adding value to the world. You're just like almost like miserly collecting money but never spending it or investing it, right? So that is one of the things that I've tried to do more so of is creation. But what I do when it comes to seeking out information I want to learn, I guess there's, and I'll give an example here. There are certain things I will do to go say, okay, I need to know something about X. I'm going to go search it out. And then there's the other one, which is I just stumble across information. Maybe I subscribe to a newsletter or two, or go to, or a blog that I go to once in a while, and I find something and I just go kind of deep down that rabbit hole, and I click the links and I follow the trails and I just see where it takes me, or I stumble across a book that kind of piques my interest, and I get into the book, and then that book will maybe either bring up other ideas or articles or things like that, and I'll kind of follow that rabbit trail. I'll just follow my curiosity, which I have intense intellectual curiosity of. And with that, I mean, I don't know, it's random. I'll stumble across something, and I love that, by the way, as I love stumbling across something that I'm like, oh my God, holy crap, my mind just blew. This is totally new. That's that idea of discovering something like hidden treasure, whether it's an article or a video or something like that, is one of my favorite things. And I try to bake that into my marketing, which remind me, I'm going to make a note to circle back, because I think it's a really powerful marketing strategy, is the concept of discovery.
Yep.
So I'm just going to make a note to come back.
That's why it's one of the steps in the customer journey I teach. Sorry.
Yep. So the other side is when I specifically want to learn something about something else. So for instance, this is a trick I don't tell a lot of people because it makes me look like I'm magic. But like, God, that's so smart. Where did you come up with that? So if I'm working with a client, for instance, and they are well, actually, I'll do this. We mentioned Stiletto Coffee. I had a coffee business.
Yeah.
It was a failed coffee business, but notwithstanding,
but the assets weren't a failure, because I love it. I love watching all the stuff you created.
It was cool. The economics just weren't working out, and the opportunity cost was hard. But when I started off doing this, I didn't know anything about it. And the very first thing I did was I typed in like coffee brand in Google, like plus marketing case study. Any product niche or whatever you're doing, type that in and then add a modifier plus marketing case study. You would be blown away by the kind of information you can find, because there's everybody from universities to big brands to whatnot doing case studies on the, what a brand did or a company did to go from zero to hero. It's a zero to hero story. Rags to riches, especially with companies, is one of the types of stories that people love telling and people love reading about, and they're out there. I've got a friend of mine who has a sex toy business, and he was asking me for some ideas the other day about, man, how do I market sex toys effectively? I just don't know. And I was like, let me think about that, and I'll get back to you some ideas. I literally went to the web and I just typed in like sex toy plus marketing case study, and I found a bunch of them, and I sent him an article with a bunch of ideas. He's like, man, this is brilliant. Like, how do you know these things? And we're like, well, Google
University.
Yeah, Google University. So that's an idea, or that's an example of having a very specific thing in mind to go, okay, what do I need to know? Has somebody else done this? Who else, like, great reference back to the book, Who Not How. Who else has already done this work for me that I don't have to reinvent the wheel?
Yep.
And I love marketing case studies because they actually lay out exactly what you need to know. This is how they got their first customers. This is how they got traffic. This is how they scaled. These are the problems they ran into. So that is a fun secret weapon that all your listeners and viewers should just do. Take your business and take the industry or the product type or whatever it is, and then type in plus marketing case study.
Yeah.
The other things I do when I'm trying to remember information or things that I learn, I just try to do what I think Tiago Forte who's a thought leader in the space of personal knowledge management calls progressive summarization. I try to look for something. I use a tool to highlight and like a web page, for instance, it's like you're highlighting a Kindle book. And I'm looking for the things that I might want to reference back to later on, because those are the things that are going to give you the context for what your reading is about. And then I will copy those. Like I might read an article and just have 3 or 4 highlights. That's fine. I may have 50. And then I'm going to copy those over into, a tool. You can use Evernote. I'm using Roam, ROAM research.com.
What do you use to highlight on the browser?
Oh, there is, if you're using Roam, actually, you don't even need Roam for this, but it's awesome. It's called Roam, ROAM Highlighter. It's a Chrome or Brave plugin. It's free, and it allows you to copy something.
Yep.
And that's like every time I highlight, I'm just highlighting things, and the highlight stays, and then you click a button at the bottom of it that says copy all highlights. And then when you paste it into whatever note taker you're using, it pulls in the title of the article, the URL, and then bullet points on it. So it's just like highlight, copy, and then paste where I want it. And then what I'll do is I'll go through those highlights, and I'll look for, like, this is the progressive summarization. I'll look for the biggest ideas, because I don't care if you're reading a book, an article, or whatever, no matter how good it is. I don't even think we retain 20% unless it's a very short article.
Yep.
Those books, if you walk away with 5% of the big ideas, congratulations. But then, so what I'll try to do is get what are the few biggest ideas from that. And for instance, using the example of that book, Who Not How. So I highlighted the hell out of it through Kindle. I exported those highlights into Roam, which is also easy to do. But that's not what we're going to talk about now. Google that shit. And then what I did is I went through and I looked for, of those passages in there, I looked for the most poignant ones, and I highlighted them again, or I bolded them, or I pulled them out. And I'm like, all right, if I just remember these 3 things, if nothing else out of this entire thing, this is what I want to focus on. And it's the process of doing that integrates it deeper in your mind. Even though I'm only looking for a few things, it reminds me, I never thought about this until right now. It reminds me back when I was in grade school and high school, I would have been a cheater. I had full intent to cheat my ass off, but the act of trying to cheat made me learn it. For instance, I would create these really small writing little crib note cheats, like cheat sheets that I could put like in my pants leg or something, so that I was going to go into class, I'd have all the answers. And I went into many classes with that cheat sheet stuck in my shirt pocket or something like that. And I never had to pull it out, because the process of building the cheat sheet caused me to learn it. So it's like, damn it, I wanted to cheat. I was like, I didn't have to. My intent was cheating.
Okay, so I love this. I opened 3 loops in the question. They've all been closed. But I think one thing, 2 sides of this, and I think this is really important, especially going like to the opening of this, where like you talk about like your 2 threads that you're working on being delegation and then leadership development, right? I think this ties into it perfectly when you think about consumption. You talked about intentional consumption or accidental consumption, but I think what is so powerful about both of them is that they both have a really tight container on them, right? If it's intentional, it's I'm going to find something. So you go, you find it, then you're complete and you implement it, or you note take it. But then when it's accidental, you don't find it, get the dopamine hit of it. You find it, and then you summarize it and you put it into something so that you can integrate it. You use and for those when we say PKM, it's personal knowledge management. It's just basically how you take notes or how you access your own information or things like that. Brad's way more versed in it than I am. He just teaches me what to do and I follow what he says. But then the accidental side is like, okay, if I'm going to consume this, right, I come across this article, making sure I don't just read it, but I read it and then I take contextually or something that resonates with me so I can remember it and apply it to my business. Then you file that away somewhere in like a note system or an Evernote or something along those lines for reference. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And exactly. And then the goal, which is what I particularly love about Roam, but the goal is not to have to file it away in something like, okay, I need to remember that this goes in this file folder or category or whatever. The goal is to either use certain keywords or context when you're taking notes. And it doesn't even have to be much. Like if I read an article about copywriting, and I save it over here, all I have to do is put the word copywriting or sometimes a hashtag copywriting on the notes, because then I can go back to my notes. It's like, man, I remember what was that thing about copywriting? I just type in copywriting or I click on the hashtag and it'll pull it up and I can kind of scan. I go, oh, that's where it is.
Yep.
So I always just think about, I'm very unorganized when it comes to taking notes, when it comes like to categorize them and things like that. But because I'm so methodical about like keeping the right notes and making sure that there's context behind it, when I need to go find it, it's easy to find. I just type in the keyword or two that I'm looking for. And the loop I didn't close and I wrote down here is discovery. Yep. So I love that. It is one of the things that humans love the most. Like, we absolutely love it. We love going on treasure hunts. We love, just going to explore. It's something built into our DNA. It's why we are explorers, why we explored the West when the settlers came here, et cetera. We love discovering new things because there's that dopamine hit. I guess it's a dopamine hit of novelty.
Yeah.
Like, wow, this is so cool. A lot of times we don't bake that into our marketing and our business, in letting instead of shoving our product down our customers' throats, I was like, check out what this is. Like, I'm just sticking it in front of your face. I've found that some of the best marketing, I'm trying to think of some really good examples, is when you discover something and it almost feels as like your discovery, almost like a lot of people love discovering a new band, like an unheard of band that then catches fire. Yeah. And if I listen to a DJ or a band, I'm like, this is fire, this is amazing. I want to tell other people about it because I don't believe that everybody knows about this yet, because if I discovered it, it means it wasn't in front of my face the whole time. And we love sharing discoveries with our friends. That's why things go viral. There's a lot of that. So I'm always trying to find a good, I don't even have a framework for this, but how can I let my customers discover what I'm trying to sell them as opposed to force feed it? Now, sometimes that could be maybe an article that you're writing. Maybe this is like top of funnel material that you're writing about something else, and you may just briefly mention your product, where your product is not the centralized focus of what you're writing, but you're allowing them to go, wait, what's that?
Yeah.
Like, almost, I actually think you can almost hide something just enough. It's almost like an Easter egg popping out that I see the color, but I only see part of it. People will pick up on that. We're trained to pick up on it. It's like, well, let me click on that and go check it out, especially because if I'm not trying to force feed it down your throat, it doesn't smell like an ad.
Yeah.
And actually, this is one of the things that I'm working on right now with a model, right? Like, there's a landing page template, like a native ad article, and you know what I'm talking about, that I'm
sure
building
do.
out. And this one, the way I've built it, the way they've done it, and the way I've built it to model that is, it's a top of the funnel article about a certain thing. It's not about the product. And then when they get to the product, when they get through the article, it hammers home, this is the product you need. Go get it. It's very direct. I want to test out a version that just kind of mentions it, this product in a couple places, but doesn't hammer it home, and see which one of them leads, like how many of them catch it and follow that rabbit trail. Like, oh, wow, that's interesting. Tell me more about this. And it'll be a interesting marketing test that I'm working on.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so important about that. Like, I actually want to pull this thread with you because we can talk about this all day. This is, fun stuff. So when we think about like marketing, right? So one book recommendation based on what you said, discovery, for everybody listening, I recommend Jonah Berger, like there's no tomorrow. Brad jumps on this one too, but the book Contagious talks about why things catch on and why things go viral. And the reason we share discoveries, because Brad and I probably text each other 2 to 3 new discoveries a day. Like, no joke. We were like brainstorming, like, how can we submit links to each other without him coming through our text? And we're playing with some stuff right now. But, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but there's only 1 of 5 reasons people share things they discover: humor, credibility, social status, education, or controversy. That's it. Those are the only 5, right? And so if you discover something and you're like, oh, my friends will think this is cool, well, there's social status. If you discover something and it's helpful, my friends will use this, you get credibility for helping them. If it's like this new way to do marketing, you get the education points, right? Of course, if it's controversial, you do it. But what you said, I think, is so powerful because I think, Brad, when we look at the state of marketing, you've been in this game just as long as I have, if not longer. What I tend to see is there's two camps. There's a camp of like direct response, like hard sell, 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 sell. And then there's this camp of like value-based, content-based, longer journey. And everybody tends to swing to one of either sides instead of realizing that they both are required, right?
Mhm.
Because when you think about like that article that you're writing, and so just for everybody, wondering, like what we're talking about is like writing an article about benefits and then introducing a product, passively, or writing an article about the product and being like, just buy the product. They both belong in marketing, both of them, and they
Mhm.
belong at different parts of the customer journey. And so when we think about this, like I love thinking about like, oh yeah, like if I understand a customer journey that's not linear, it's not 3 days, right? It's not like step one, step two, step three, step four. It's a matter of them discovering, when they're going to invest in, when they're having that pain point, when it resonates with them, and they all are a part of the ecosystem, right? And so when you say, by the way, I would love to see this. I already know the answer to this test because it's going to be both, and I know the company as well. So, we think about that, a lot of terms people use is like top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, but really when you break that down, it's just like cold, warm, hot.
Yeah.
That's really what it is.
Levels of awareness,
Yeah,
and it's actually, when you break it down even further, it's level, the age old marketing formula of AIDA:
yep.
attention, interest, desire, and
Interest.
action. Those are levels of awareness and desire, right? Like
Yeah.
it's
Well,
the highest level.
And so the reason I say that it's both for everybody is because like I'll help people go on the content side, right? Where it's almost like an Easter, like, hey, we're gonna help you, and then you discover the link, you click through, right? That works really well, and it's amazing because it only gets the right customer at the right time to click through. Everybody else had a positive touch point. But
Mhm.
then you get to a point where there are some people that will get the touch points and then they'll never click through, but they want the product. And then you have an article that they can see and read about, like, no, this is why you need the product. Like, this is what it's going to do for you. And this is how it's going to help you. Like, literally, now is the time to go. And so I say this because I see these two camps. And it's almost like it's either direct response, boom, 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 or it's like this value based. And I think everybody has to realize that they belong in the same world. And
Yeah.
it's the customer journey above it, that does that.
Yeah, and that's the real nuance and art to it, and you got to test it out. And some stuff, I mean, it even depends. Like, I'm going to run this test, and it may not work. It doesn't mean the concept doesn't work. It means the execution may not have worked.
Mm-hmm.
But one of my favorite quotes, and I don't know who to attribute it to, but I've used it for years, is that marketing is nothing except guessing and testing. Guessing and testing. I'm going to guess if it's going to work. I don't know. I think it will, but how many times have we guessed something would work and it flops? Like this is going to hit a home run, and it's crickets.
Actually,
And
that gives me a good question. When you think about that, because that one, that's a good one. The amount of things that I've made seven figures on that I was like, this will never work.
yeah,
Like there is no way this will work is like mind blowing. So like when you think back, like what was one of your like biggest surprises of like the guessing and testing where you're like, I can't believe this worked. Like whip out the secrets. Like if it was painfully obvious or not painfully obvious, it was painful for you to share, like you asked your guests to do.
um, trying to think if there was one of those where I'm like, how the hell did that work?
Or the other side, and both. Like one that you were like, I
Well, there's
guarantee
been,
this
okay,
works.
I'll tell you the one that I thought for sure would work, and it flopped. Um, it took a lot of work. It actually burned me out of an entire niche, and I sold the business. So, so this is like, I don't know, shit, 10 years ago, maybe pushing 10 years ago. But I had a product a long time ago in the dating advice niche, and it was selling magic tricks to the whole guy, all the guys selling pickup artists. I was like, I'm going to show you how to use magic tricks to, throw that in your flirty game. And, that was the very first thing I ever started off with, selling information on online, and it was fun. But then I decided, okay, I'm going to create a product for just strict dating advice, because I had this big list and I had all these affiliates. And at the time, there still is, there's a million, what do you call them, virtual summits out there right now, right?
Yep.
You're familiar with that? Yeah. And for those who are not, which is probably nobody who's not familiar with a virtual summit, it's, let's say I'm going to do 25 different interviews with different people about topics on marketing, or in this case, dating. I've never liked them. I see no value in those things because I don't want to sit through 25 interviews. I mean, there's podcasts out there right now. I can download them on demand. I don't want to sit through this and then buy them, et cetera. And I don't have time to spend 25 hours, right? So this is the problem I'm looking to solve. And now I said, but I have all these relationships and they have traffic, and I want to do something that I think would be a better product and a better way to consume their advice, this expert guru level advice. And I never saw anything like this exist. So there's the problem. Mm-hmm. The solution was I'm going to interview 25 of the top dating experts in the world, and I'm going to ask them each 25 questions. Okay. And all of these questions are broken down into categories such as, like, for example, what would be, if you're a single guy, it was all designed for guys. What is your best way to approach a woman, like, let's say during the day outside of a bar? And then the second question is, what would be your best advice to approach a woman in a bar, nightclub environment, right? Another question would be like, what would be how do you keep a conversation going after the initial opening? And what I did, these are 25 most commonly asked questions. And I was just like, I'm going to ask every single person a very regimented set of questions so that all 25 people answered all 25 questions. Now, instead of giving you the full interview, what I did is I painstakingly had an editor go through each one of them and break out all 25 little clips just of them answering the question. And right, just the question. And then we built this matrix inside this membership area. And all you had to do was like, all right, here's 25 questions. Which question do you want to know the answer to right now? And I may want to go to the part which says, what's the best way to get a girl's phone number or something like that? I don't know. I don't think that was the question. But you click on it, and then you see a grid of all 25 gurus and a little play button on their face, and you just click it. And I can go around to hear the 2-minute answer to each person's perspective on this little question. Are you following me? You understand how this works?
Yeah, I was like, this has to work.
It's so brilliant. And I couldn't sell it to save my life. Like, I had everybody on that list, all 25 of the top gurus, the biggest list, and they were all promoting the hell out of it. And I mean, I think it did like $70,000 in sales, which is nothing. I was expecting at least $500,000 in sales from the size of the traffic I had, but it was this brilliant product. Like, this is great. I can just go to each one of them and push your button and say, I want the answer. What would you say to this? What would you say to this? And it was brilliant. It did 70,000. Divided by 2, because there was all affiliate traffic, there was 35,000, divided by another 2, because I had a 50-50 partner in this thing. So I walked away with probably less than $20,000 after all this work. And I said, I'm selling this entire business. I'm getting out of this niche. I'm burned out. Screw this. Screw you guys. I'm going home.
Oh my goodness.
So that was one where I thought, this is a brilliant product. Granted, I still like the idea of the product. Maybe my marketing chops were not up maybe to snuff at the time. Maybe I just didn't know how to sell it. Maybe I was so burnt out after having created this product before selling it that I didn't want to do it anymore, which is why I'm a big proponent these days of sell it first, create it after you validate it. But yeah, there's a super long, drawn out emotional story of me thinking this is going to be a great idea, and it flopped. Stiletto Coffee was another one. I had a great brand, I had a great idea, a great hook, great graphics and everything else. And I just ignored the unit economics of how I was going to make this work. And I put blinders on, and I just couldn't do it. So best ideas be damned. It was, a failed venture.
And for those of you wondering about coffee, I owned a coffee business as well. I don't think there are effective unit economics in coffee companies. Quite frankly, we figured it out. But yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. So I'm gonna take back to something you said earlier, because you opened a loop and I found a solution to the loop.
Ooh, what's that?
So the quote: marketing is nothing but guessing and testing. Do you want to know why? It was said on your podcast.
Well, but by me or somebody else?
Nope, by Todd.
Todd who?
Todd Brown.
Todd Brown said that.
Todd Brown said that on your podcast. I went to the good old Google. I couldn't do it with just the quote. I had to put it in quotations, and then you code up as the first two results. It's not easy. You have to get the guts to go on the roller coaster ride. I've heard many people say marketing is nothing but guessing and testing. So he said it on your podcast.
Ah, good old Todd.
Yep.
Awesome.
So when you think about that, like so like my brain, when you were talking about like that dating on demand thing,
yeah,
and that thing, I was like, that's a genius idea. But then my immediate brain went to, I've had a lot of experiences like that where I was like, this is it. This is what they want. This is what they want. And it never worked because I was reminded that that isn't what they wanted. That's what they said they wanted. Right. But a lot of people, like I said this to somebody before, I said, what's interesting is like, everyone's like, oh, I love this keynote. I love these TED Talks. I love this, whatever. And I was like, but there's 3 takeaways, right? I could give you all 3 takeaways in 35 seconds, to 90 seconds. I was like, but these keynotes take an hour, but they're just delivering 3 takeaways. It's literally hook, story, takeaway, story, takeaway, story, takeaway, close. And I was like, that storytelling part, and even like that looping back into the discovery part, I think is such a critical component, because I think the ideas are always there. And what I have found most of the time is when I was like, this is the best solution. Like, this is the best product. This is the best implementation. This is the best everything. It's very logical because I'm like, here's the actual doing solution, but it's missing the feeling that they're looking for. And there's that disconnect in between them all. It happened to me numerous times.
Yeah. And, it also goes to show that sometimes, like the very first product I ever built, I built a product that I would buy if it existed. I was like, I'm building the solution to my own problem.
Mm-hmm.
And on this one, I was doing the exact same thing. The first one worked. The second one didn't. Doesn't mean the second one couldn't have worked. It absolutely could have worked, but it didn't. And it goes to show that, yes, sometimes building a product that solves your own problem is a great way to do it. And sometimes it's definitely not, because not everybody wants that problem solved, or not enough people want that problem solved. So you got to kind of figure that out and do a little bit more research up front, which, if you're a quick start, that's hard to do. I have to slow myself down and go through a 3-step process that is been super critical for me, that when I skip it, I usually fail. When I don't skip it, I usually succeed. And I'll touch on that. I know you and I've talked about this Disney dreamstorming process.
I love this. You shared this with me. I use this all the time now.
It was so important to my success that it was the very first podcast episode I did like 6 years ago. And I learned it over a decade ago when I was studying NLP, and they were talking about this concept of how Robert Dilts, who is one of the pioneers of neurolinguistic programming, went back and studied the strategies of all these geniuses throughout history. And one of them was Walt Disney. And he found that what Walt did was he had separated out the 3 internal, you could call them voices or states of mind whenever we are planning or a new project. And it could be a business, it can be anything. And this was into the dreamer. I'll use Robert Dilts' language: the dreamer, the realist, and the critic, or the spoiler. Or this could be the dreamer, the planner, and then the critic. And so what happens is that whenever we have an idea, and especially if you've ever had a great idea, maybe as a business idea, and you go to share it with your spouse or your friend or co-workers or colleagues or employees, you're like, oh, I got this great idea. Check this out. If you're like most people, the very first thing you're going to hear is why it won't work. Well, yeah, but here's why that won't work, because of this, and blah, 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 blah. And I think naturally we go into that thing. We hear, okay, there's your idea, and we critique it, because we're trying to actually protect you from screwing yourself up. But nobody likes that. Like, we hear it, and then you just basically pooped on our party, and like, man, it's no fun. The thing is, we do it to ourselves. Yep. And it's not just the critiquing. We'll have an idea like, for example, I want to create a coffee. I've got this idea for a coffee brand directed towards women, and it's going to be called Stiletto Coffee. And I can see the branding, and then I go, but okay, so all I have to do is get some coffee roasters and design this stuff. And but you know what? Who's going to drink the coffee? And are people going to buy it? And this, that, and the other, right? Like, and we have this cacophony of sounds in our head of dreaming, planning, and critiquing all at the same time. And they're three totally separate voices, and neither one of them wants to listen to each other. The dreamer doesn't want to listen to the planner. He sure as hell doesn't want to listen to the critic telling him why it won't work. So what happens is one of two things. Either we have what's called idea abortion, which is, I got this great idea, but then that critic popped up, whether it's you critiquing me as a friend or a partner, or it's me critiquing myself. And we go, oh, that probably won't work for this reason or that. And I just abort the idea before it's fully baked out. Or we do what I did in Stiletto Coffee is I was so enamored with the dream and then the possible, and I could see the plan on how to get it done. I shoved a sock in the critic's mouth and I said, I don't want to hear your unit economics, margin, profit margin. Like, what if people don't buy a subscription? How are you going to get people to enjoy the taste of a coffee they've never tried and buy it online? Blah, blah, blah. Like, I just ignored it. And I said to myself, what a lot of entrepreneurs do is I'll just figure it out as, I'll solve those problems as they come. Sometimes you can't solve those problems as they come. And it's not until you realize that, like, for instance, that critic has a very specific role, and it's not to rain on the parade. It's to make sure that that you overcome, that you're actually cognizant of the hurdles and the challenges you're going to face. And you're like, all right, cool. These are what I'll face. Now, here's the secret to this whole thing. Like, understanding there's the mindset of the dreamer, there's the mindset of the planner, and there's the mindset of the critic. The key to it is when you're in dreaming mode, don't plan and don't critique, just dream. See it playing out before you like it's on a movie screen, like it's happening. And here you're only asking what if, like, what if we do this? What if we do this? What if we do this? Now, once you've got a kind of a decent little dream in mind and a vision, if you would, you're going to step into the next frame of mind, or think of it as the next office where there's maybe storyboards up, and all you're going to do is plan out, okay, here's what, let's plan out how. Given what I know about this, how would I do this? And there's only two rules in the planning or the realist office, and that's don't add new shit to the dream and don't critique it. Right? And then finally, once you've got a general vision or a dream, and then you've got a general plan, now take it into this critic's mindset. And this could be by yourself, this could be with your friends and partners or whatever. And you go, okay, let's poke holes. What are we missing? Like, why not? So it's like, what if, how, and why not? Right? And now we go, okay, well, it's going to cost X amount of money. Do we have that money? It's going to take these resources. There's an opportunity cost. If you do this, Brad, will you have time to do that, which you also said is important? And you can guess the final rule. When you're critiquing it, don't solve those problems. Don't plan them. Don't add new dreams. Just critique and let them flow. Because what happens is when you give each one of these internal voices its own time on stage, if you would, or its own time with the conch shell, Lord of the Flies reference, they get to be fully heard and go and validated and go, all right, here we go. Now you've got everything. The key then is, if to making it all work, is ideally the dreamer and the planner mindset, whether it's you or your team, you go out and you fix and you find a solution for every one of the critics' objections. And if you can't, maybe you don't do it, maybe you abort. But if you can, and you take this thing back to the critic, and the critic goes, I don't see anything wrong with this, green light. Now you've got something that works. I didn't do this with Stiletto Coffee. Like, I just put the blinders on and I was like, I'm going to ignore it. And it screwed me up. And these days I do this not only with myself, but every single one of my clients, business partners. It's mandatory for them to know this, this 3-part strategy, because, and even Shane, who, one of my business partners, is now, he'll be like, hey, so I know you're in the dreamer's office. Can we step into the critic's office in a second? And I'm like, absolutely. Or he'll say, hey, I'm just in the dreamer's office. Go with me on this. And what that tells me is that, hey, we're thinking what if right now. Don't jump into all the shit that could go wrong. We'll get there. Right. And it's so productive. By the way, do it with your spouse. Like, teach Lindsay this, teach your wife, teach your, husbands and boyfriends this, because as entrepreneurs, which I think everybody listening to this is, if you communicate like this, you're giving them a frame of reference for how you're thinking. Like, hey, I got this wild idea. I'm in the dreamer's office. Just go with it. And maybe it's like, hey, maybe we're going to move to a foreign country because the president we want didn't get elected, right? Like, where would we go? Like, just imagine what would be amazing if we did. Like, would we go to Colombia? Would we go to France? Would we
Costa
go to Asia?
Rica.
Costa Rica? Where would we go? And then you just dream together. And then the next thing you go is like, okay, well, how would we do that? Or, actually, I'll give you another little key thinking tool here, taken from the world of design thinking, which is one of the most powerful words that the top innovators use, or phrases, which is called how might we.
Yep.
It's way more powerful than how do we, because how might we adds a degree of, I don't know if it's possible, but how might we do it? Right. So for instance, you and I both have podcasts. They're not as popular as Joe Rogan's, as is like no podcast is as popular as Joe Rogan's. And if you and I sat down and we go, hey, all right, how do we create a podcast, the George and Brad show, or even your podcast or my podcast? How do we overtake Joe Rogan's podcast in popularity? It's like, fuck, I have no clue. But if you and I brainstormed with this premise, how might we do it? Do you actually feel the shift in energy
1,000%.
and creativity? Yeah, you go, okay, we probably couldn't, but if we could, how might we do that? And now you just play. It allows you to just come up with wackadoo ideas, and once in a while that it works. So anyway, yeah, like if we did move to Costa Rica, how might we do that? Well, would we sell where we're living, or would we just rent it out? I don't know. How long would we have to stay there? And you start doing that. Then you go into the well, why not? Well, Costa Rica's got mosquitoes and I don't like mosquitoes. Like, I don't know. You come up with stuff like, but anyway, I can talk for days. I did my entire first episode on this, but it's real simple. Dream, plan, critique. Don't do, and only do them one at a time, and make sure the person you're working with or living with knows what you're doing.
Yes.
And it'll avoid a hell of a lot of conflict.
Well, there's so much in there, and like I just want to summarize it. So first, like it goes all the way back to the opening of the episode where we talked about patience, right? Because if you have an idea and you think it has to be done today, it's not a good idea. Like firefighting doesn't create sustainable results, right? And so what I love about this is that this gives you a container or a framework for taking what might feel like immediate or might feel like urgent, and it gets you into this slowdown, right? It gets you into your parasympathetic state to really be like, okay, no, let me go through this. Let me see if we can do this. Let me make sure this isn't costing us opportunity or costing us time, right? And it allows you to fully bake it all. And the one thing that I will say is I'm still working on this with my team, but I've been utilizing this. And the biggest thing for me is giving myself a gap between each office. So if I'm doing it on my own and I'm brainstorming, I have to go dreamer and then be like, I have to go work out or take a couple calls or go walk and like schedule more time to come back and be a critic.
So when I learned this, it was in a it was actually a 3-day workshop teaching, 2 or 3 day workshop teaching just this. That was all. It was the Disney Strategies of Leadership workshop, right? Taught by 2 women in Dallas, Texas. And what was brilliant about it is when they did it, they go, okay, we're going to use what's called in NLP spatial anchoring. Mm-hmm. So you're going to be in this part, like you're just going to stand here when you're dreaming. And we would go through this with a partner. All right. You'd be standing up, and the physiology was also important. So with standing up, I would kind of bounce on my toes and I get the energy moving, and I look up and I imagine I'm watching it on a TV, like on a movie screen. And when we were done, about to move into the other frame of mind, we stepped out into what they call meta position, which is basically out. And we would say our phone number backwards in order to because it just causes you to get out of that thinking. And we go, okay, like 9, 4, 3, 2, 1, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, all right, I've kind of cleared that out, like defragged it.
Yep.
And now I'm going to step into the other one, and then I'm going to defrag it, say my phone number backwards. So it's the exact same thing. You have to give your mind the ability to change it up. When I'm doing it at the house, like I'll go for a walk when I'm in my dreamer mode. Yep. I'll come back to my office and sit on my computer, and I'll map it out when I'm in Realist, and I'll go sit in my, I've got a recliner over here, and I'll go sit in the recliner where I usually read and think, and I'll go there to critique. So I 100% change it up and need space in between.
Yeah, those state changes are massive for us. And for entrepreneurs, what I have figured out, like one of my biggest keys to success is space. Like
Mm-hmm.
just space, right? But in that also, and Benjamin Hardy actually talks about this in his first book, which is designing your environment
Oh yeah, that was a great
using
book.
using the principles of like NLP to get you into these states. And so, if you're in an office, you can do this with your colleagues in different places. If you're working remotely, do it on different calls. Like play with these things of state and being. Like if your guys are going to do a dreamer meeting, like, do some breath work and play a fun uplifting song that like gets you childlike, and then schedule another meeting, even if you take a 10-minute break in between them. Or if you're doing it on your own, make sure that you're giving yourself that space to clear and get back to neutral so you can embody this. And I was doing a podcast the other day, Brad, with Stefanos for a show we're going to launch, but I was talking about performance, right? Like we as entrepreneurs are performers. We go into a meeting and we like give our best in that meeting about brainstorming, but then we go create an ad and we give our best to that ad. And we have to remember that space after, you need it on both sides to get into, but also like kind of back into where you're being. And this is probably not the thinking part of this being a biggest breakthrough for me, but when you said to me, when we were talking about Shane, and Shane, we love you when you listen to this. And if you guys haven't slapped your vitamins on your body yet, go to vitaminpatchclub.com because you
There
should
you go.
slap it because it's a lot easier. And I actually take more vitamins now.
Slapping's better than swallowing.
Yeah, I was going to let you do it because it's my show, but God, you should hear the innuendos we throw around with this one. But seriously, for everybody listening, as an entrepreneur, and I'm just going to say this because I think everybody needs to hear this, you have one race car, and you cannot expect to win the Indy 500 or NASCAR 500 or whatever that thing is called when you put like crap in your gas tank. And I'm going to say every one of us gets to take better care of ourselves. And one of the things I struggle with is I get really in my day. I get really, really in my day. And like today I have like 7 hours of calls and I'm stoked on them, right? But then I'll forget to eat. I'll forget to drink. I have to set reminders. And I always forget my supplements. And so Brad and I are working on this project called Vitamin Patch Club. And I get my vitamin B, my vitamin D, and zinc primarily. I just put a sticker on and I wear it on my hand or on my inner arm, and it slow releases over 6 hours. And it's been like the biggest hack for me. Like I get a ton of energy. It's slow dripped out. And you guys know I don't do ads on this podcast. This is something I'm passionate about. Brad and I are working together on it. And I love the founder, Shane. So seriously, go to vitaminpatchclub.com. And my 100th episode is the first time I reference any product whatsoever. Brad, bring it up. But Brad, what that triggered for me is when you said this to me, we were actually walking down your staircase. We were walking out of the house, down your staircase. It was me, you, Tyler, and your wife. And I think Shane had already left to go work out. And you're like, the biggest distinction of this is that all you need to do to have effective communication and be a team is just let each other know what state you're in.
Yeah.
Right? Like, hey, Brad, I have an idea. Dream. Hey, Brad, I have an idea. Real. Hey, Brad, I have an idea. Critic. And it literally eliminates ambiguity, questions, doubts. Like everybody immediately syncs on the same page and we all know exactly what we're doing. And it literally has probably been one of the biggest breakthroughs I've had in doing this.
Yeah, same here. I mean, the first thing is just being aware that we are, and it seems obvious in the beginning, but it's like we're all in different states at different times, and thinking of ideas or whatnot it's one of those things that I wasn't even aware. It seems obvious whenever you're planning something, you're either, coming up with the vision, coming up with the plan, or coming up with the critique, but it's not obvious until you see it. And then once you're aware, you can't be unaware of it. Like I know exactly what state I'm in at all times. And then as far as that goes, and then, the other person is too, like, if you don't know what state they're in, and they could sometimes, some of those people are perpetual critics. Like my dad is the perpetual critic. Love him to death, but I'll come up with an idea. He'll immediately focus on all the reasons why it won't work. And for a long time, that really drove me crazy because I was like, you are no fun to take shit to. But then I realized, like, wow, this actually, and there's many times if I would have listened to him, he would have saved me a fortune, literally. But because I didn't like that state, I didn't want to be in that critical state. I was like, I don't even want to talk to people in that state because that's not fun. It cost me, I lost everything I had because I didn't listen to one of his critiques.
Well, what I think is important too about that, like you and I, like I think, I don't know, maybe I don't want to label you, but like I'm a dreamer, I'm a visionary. Like I live in the dream state, and then
Same.
I only get down into the realist state when like the pressure is on, right? Or I have to do something. But the rest of the time, I'm like all up here in ideas. But what ends up happening for me is like I get so excited about things, and I'll run it by it, and then somebody will, without me recognize it, just be in the critic state because that's where they are and they want to protect me, but I'll take it personally.
Yeah.
And it's not personal at all. But if I'm like, hey, dream with me for a minute or critique this, or even if like you and I are talking, you're like, hey, man, critic. And I'm like, boom, it's no longer personal. It's like, oh, yeah, that's a good point. Thanks for plugging me back into earth, right? Like, thanks for letting me know that like I shouldn't waste $1.5 million in investing on some idea that might not work right now. Like, it's so important. It's so important. Like, I literally can't say this enough on how important this has been for me.
Good. Well, I'm glad because I've given speeches on this. Like I've given different like speeches throughout my career and podcast episodes, but I was like, it kept on going back to like this goes in almost every single speech I've given. It's so fundamental to the way I think.
Yep.
And I don't even think about state management in like for other stuff as much as I need to. Like I did like 50 push-ups right before this show, just to kind of get myself into a little bit more state because I was just kind of like Tuesday morning. But it worked.
Yeah, I just wore my vitamin B patch.
Nice.
Yeah. And I mainlined an Americano because I just love the flavor of coffee with some water. But no, I think yeah, like I'm looking at my notes. So like I don't share this when I record, right? So while we're going through, I write notes on like what I'm going to record in the intro. On this podcast, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 intro worthy notes that are just open loops for people. I'm going to have to like summarize this thinking down and get into.
Let's go for 30.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to make you a repeating guest. I think we should just do this like every 50 episodes.
Yeah. We just record every call we're on.
Well, you know what's funny is, I mean, you know of my business partner Stefandos. We're launching a podcast called Man Reborn. And it's more on like, you know, self-development, masculine leadership, like, you know, all that stuff. But it's funny. It all started because we had a call one day. We were just syncing and I just hit record.
Mm-hmm.
And I, in my brain, told my wife, I was like, I'm going to trick Stefanos into doing a podcast. And so I didn't tell him. We just talked the whole time. And at the end of it, and I was like, and guys, I just want to thank you for listening to our first episode. And he looked at me like, what? And he's like,
what?
Yeah. And then we just scheduled like 12 calls. And all we do is the moment he jumps on this software, I just hit record and we just start talking.
That's brilliant.
Like there's no agenda, there's no nothing. It's like coffee, ketchup. But like some of the best gold has come out of that just from being.
Our mutual friends, Matt Wolf and Joe Fear and I.
Oh yeah, we have a show tomorrow because they're like, somebody canceled. I'm like, I'm in.
Yeah, they do that to me all the time. But we wanted to do that too because they've got a really popular podcast and like we don't want to be constrained in just by the topics. Like I mentioned Joe Rogan. Joe's got the ultimate podcast. Like every podcaster's got such a crush on or envy of what he's doing because he just talks about whatever the hell he's interested in. And we were joking around one day, like, let's start a podcast exactly like Joe Rogan's, only let's call it Not Joe Rogan. And that'll be the name of the show. And when people are searching, like that'll be the name in the podcast title. It's like Not Joe Rogan. And then it'll be like, hey guys, welcome. I'm Brad. This is Joe and Matt. We are, you're not listening to Joe Rogan. We told you in the episode. So if there's any mistake, we are definitely not Joe Rogan. And I ended up registering notjoerogan.com and it forwards to baconwrapbusiness.com.
Good.
But
good. Well,
I kind of want to do that. The other part of me was like, I want to get Joe's attention by having a show called Not Joe Rogan and make him go, who the hell are these guys?
Yeah. Well, we'll have to unpack contrarian marketing on an entirely different episode because it's a whole different rabbit hole. But as you're doing that, where can people come find more on how to wrap bacon around their life and business?
Baconwrapbusiness.com. Sizzling hot business advice, guaranteed to make you fat. Profits.
Oh, and
every week our chefs will cook up recipes
and just to
revenue.
Just to tie the book recommendations together, go read Contagious, and I will tell you why. Brad's name is so good because it is an example of a social trigger, because Brad and I were introduced to each other. We didn't meet, but when I ran my food blog, I knew that I either had to create a social trigger or piggyback off a social trigger. So I said, I don't want to create one. I'm going to use bacon. So everything I posted being paleo, I was like, bacon. I was in a bacon suit in my sales video, bacon, 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 bacon. So then I meet my wife. She's like, oh, you need to know this guy, Brad Costanzo. I know he runs Bacon Wrap Business. This was literally
That's so
8
funny.
years ago. Like, and maybe 6 when she said it, but like it was there, and like that's the power of social triggers. Like it's just a neural pathway in the brain for people, but it's covered in contagious. So, Brad, we're just gonna have to do this repeat, and everybody listening, hit me up and let me know what you want Brad and I to talk about next time, because I think he's gonna have to be a regular since we talk every day anyways, and we'll just start recording more of our conversations.
You know what, too? Like, I like conversations like this, and just we just kind of free flow. I don't do these enough on my own show, like solo. I hate doing solo casts because I need somebody to kind of bounce off of. So I love doing stuff like this where we can just see where it goes.
Yeah,
Rabbit trails.
My solo casts are good if I like have an idea that like I've just wanted to share, but I can't do a solo cast if the teams like talk about this.
No, yeah.
But like I'll be sitting here and I can't get this thought off my mind, and so I'll just hit record and it'll just bleh.
That's I want to have another podcast called Rabbit Trails.
Rabbit Trails, dude.
That would actually be good. Where
that's
where
why
will this go?
That's why I love Rome Research. So by the way, for everybody listening to this one, you're gonna have to re-listen to this one with a notepad. There's 6 book recommendations, 2 tool recommendations off the top of my head, but Rome Research being one of them. Look up PKM and go get familiar with personal knowledge management. The Disney Dreamer, with the Dreamer, the Realist, and the Critic. Like, this thing is literally action-packed. And so I'm going to have you wrap it with your sizzling bacon, right, to make fat profits, as you would say. But as we bring this one to a close, like if you could leave everybody with anything, this last kind of piece in their brain, use your little NLP ninja tactics to make sure they take away something and keep it in them. But how would you close? How would you wrap? What would you take people away with?
These big ones stump me until they kind of get in. I think the key for, I mentioned that this is what's worked for me is intellectual curiosity. And I think the world is missing a lot of curiosity, and it comes down to just curiosity about how other industries are solving problems that it could solve for you, how other people are solving problems. It doesn't even have to do with business. It could come down right. Today is the day of the election, right? That we're recording this.
Yeah.
And I think that if more people were curious as opposed to judgmental about the other side, they would be like, all right, you vote this way, I vote that way. I am diametrically opposed to what you think. But instead, like I get curious, like, well, what would make you vote that way? Whether it's for Republican or Democrat or whatnot, like what is the thought process that goes into it? I think that curiosity doesn't kill the cat. I think it's the exact opposite. I think curiosity creates opportunities for us to evolve as a species, because it allows us to have those new discoveries and create those new insights and those, golly, I never would have thought about it like that before. It's been responsible for my success and what I consider my happiness. And I think if more people just cultivated just more curiosity without judgmental and just go, well, let's figure it out. I don't know, but I'm willing to look. I think that'd solve a lot of business and personal problems.
I couldn't agree more, my friend. I couldn't agree more. Well, I'm not going to do one of those awkward outros like, thanks, it was so great to connect. I'll talk to you in 20 minutes.
Thanks, I was super excited.
I was super excited to have you on the show, and like I hope we stay in touch, but I'll never email you and text you, except I'm going to text you 64 more times throughout the day, and then you're still going to let me know about this Saturday if you guys are going to do your crazy, crazy day. But I'm going to keep our personal lives off of the episode, so I'm going to wrap. And so here's the one thing that I want to cement home with what Brad just said at the end of this, and we'll leave the golden nugget at the end of the rainbow at the end of the episode on the Mind of George show, which, by the way, I named the Mind of George show because I could talk about whatever I wanted, and I used the domain for too long to change it to the George Bryant show. So the Mind of George it was, and it belongs in a straitjacket if you can't tell, but if it's your slice of crazy, please stick around. But what Brad just said about intellectual curiosity, when I look back at 12 years of work on myself, personal development work, mindset, leadership, even leadership in the Marine Corps, the one trend that's always been underneath of it can be simply referenced as play more, be more childlike, be more curious, be more in the flow and present. And the only guarantee, the only constant we have is change. And rigid thinking in business and life and entrepreneurship will only create rigid results, and it hurts really bad. And so be open, ask deeper questions, be playful with yourself, be playful with your own ideas, be a dreamer, and then be a critic, and then be a realist. Like, play with it and give yourself the space to tap into your wisdom and your intuition by being playful with yourself, those around you, your team, and everything. Like, the threads of this episode have so many levels of undertones when it comes to leadership and business development and growth. And like, these are the quote unquote secrets that you'll utilize. So I wanted to hammer this. I've never done this at the end of an episode, but like, this is one I'm going to listen to again. Brad brought the fire. He brought the heat. So I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to go try to pick a topic from this podcast to put in the intro, and I'm going to see you guys in the next episode. So remember that relationships always beat algorithms, and it's time for the outro.